Now, picture this. You see a bag left behind, sitting on a bench, a piece of someone's forgotten world just waiting to be discovered. You pick it up, thinking it's a simple thing, nothing out of the ordinary. But as you open it, your eyes land on something unexpected, something that was never meant for you. A letter. And as you unfold the paper, your heart starts to race, because what you're about to read might just change everything you thought you knew about yourself. You're not just holding a letter, you're holding the key to a mystery that could tie your fate to someone else's in ways you never imagined. What would you do in that moment? Would you walk away, leaving the bag where you found it, or would you feel compelled to find the person it belongs to? You know you should return it, but there's something about that letter that feels like it's calling to you. You're standing at a crossroads. The mystery is too powerful to ignore. You're drawn to it, to the secret it holds. And as you carefully read those first few words, you begin to wonder, how could a simple act of kindness, the return of a forgotten bag, turn into a twist of fate that leads you down a path you never saw coming? Welcome to a story that will keep you on the edge of your seat, make you question your own decisions, and perhaps even change the way you see the world around you. This isn't just about a forgotten bag or a misplaced letter, it's about fate, connections, and the way life has a tendency to bring people together when they least expect it. Stick around, because I promise you, by the time this story ends, you'll be thinking about the choices you make every single day. The kind of choices that could lead you to something far more profound than you ever imagined. But first, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like the universe was sending you a message? Something you couldn't ignore, something that pulled you in, like a thread woven through your life, connecting you to something or someone unseen? Maybe it's a feeling. Maybe it's a strange coincidence that seems too significant to be random. Or maybe it's something as simple as picking up a forgotten bag. Because, in this story, that's where everything begins. A simple moment that leads to a discovery that no one could have predicted. So, let's dive into the heart of the story, one that starts with a chance encounter, a bag left behind, and a letter that will haunt the man who finds it. Meet Alex, an ordinary guy, or so he thought. When he finds the bag, it doesn't feel like a typical day. Something about it feels different, as though it's carrying a message meant just for him. He looks around, expecting to see someone rushing to claim it, but the street is empty. A little hesitation lingers. Should he just leave it? Or should he take it to the lost and found at the nearest cafe? The curiosity grows as he notices the letter inside, partially hidden, as if it were placed there intentionally for him to find. But who left it there? And more importantly, why? Alex had never thought of himself as someone who would go out of his way for a stranger's forgotten belongings. He had his own life, his own set of routines, his own quiet world where nothing out of the ordinary ever happened. But today, for some reason, this bag feels like more than just a bag. As he holds it, the weight of it seems symbolic, as though it's been waiting for him to find it. And when he carefully unfolds that letter, he can't help but feel that the universe has nudged him to make this choice, to open it. What Alex doesn't know, as he reads the letter, is that it's not just an ordinary message. It's not a simple note of apology, a love letter, or some forgotten reminder of a past life. It's something far more intriguing, something that speaks to him personally. The letter mentions things that no one could know about him, not even the stranger who had written it. It's as though the author of this letter had been watching him or perhaps had been a part of his life long before they even met. The words on the page are eerie and personal, and they stir something deep inside Alex. He doesn't know it yet, but he's about to be pulled into a mystery that will shake his understanding of the world and of himself. Now, here's the catch, this is where the story truly begins to twist. The letter doesn't just talk about the woman who left the bag behind. It hints at something much deeper, something tied to Alex's own past. And with that realization, Alex is thrown into a whirlwind of emotions, confusion, and urgency. Should he find the woman and return the bag? Or should he follow the clues hidden in the letter and see where they lead, risking everything he thought he knew about himself? This is not a simple matter of returning a lost item. It's the beginning of a journey that will change both their lives forever. But that's not all. There's a twist in the letter, a secret that Alex hasn't yet discovered. Something more sinister, more life-changing than he could ever have imagined. A piece of information that, once revealed, will make everything about this encounter feel deliberate. And that's when the real mystery begins to unfold. As Alex digs deeper, he'll uncover truths that will force him to question not only the intentions of the woman who left the letter but also the hidden forces at work in his own life. Who are the people behind this mysterious bag and letter? And what connection do they have to Alex's past, something he's spent years trying to forget? By now, I'm sure you're feeling the pull of curiosity, wondering what comes next. But trust me, you haven't even scratched the surface. This isn't just about a man returning a forgotten bag, it's about fate, mystery, and a hidden past that's slowly coming back to the surface. As Alex begins to unravel the secrets within the letter, he realizes that the journey he's about to embark on might be far more dangerous than he ever expected. And by the time this story reaches its conclusion, you'll be left wondering if you've been following your own fate all along, just like Alex. Stay with me, because the next part of this story is where things get really interesting. The letter is only the beginning. What happens next will change everything you thought you knew about the world, about choices, and about the power of a single moment. So, if you're ready to follow this journey all the way through, I promise you, you're going to want to stay tuned. The answers you're looking for are just around the corner, and trust me, they're worth the wait. As Alex stood there, still gripping the forgotten bag in his hands, a rush of conflicting thoughts flooded his mind. He hadn't planned on getting involved in something like this. Just a moment ago, he was a man going about his usual day, a routine that had begun to feel monotonous and predictable. Alex worked in marketing at a small but growing tech startup, a job that, for all its promises, often felt more like a hamster wheel than a stepping stone. He'd been stuck in the same cycle for months: wake up, go to work, push papers, attend meetings, then go home to his apartment, rinse and repeat. There was something about the repetitiveness of it all that had begun to drain him. The excitement of fresh opportunities, the kind of change that came with taking risks, had all but faded into the background. And if he was being honest, he was starting to wonder if maybe he'd made the wrong choices along the way, or if he had just settled for a life that didn't really feel like his own anymore. It wasn't as though Alex didn't have friends. He did. But most of them were as caught up in their own lives as he was in his. He had a couple of close friends from college, but they were spread out, living in different parts of the city or working in jobs that kept them too busy to check in regularly. Then there was Olivia, his ex. They'd been together for 2 years before things ended, and although they both agreed it was mutual, Alex had never quite shaken the feeling that there were things left unsaid. Olivia had been the kind of person who could fill a room with energy, who always seemed to know exactly what she wanted and how to get it. Their breakup had been calm, civilized, even, but deep down, Alex suspected that they both carried a little bitterness. He hadn't talked to her in months, and the distance between them only seemed to grow with time. But Olivia was a piece of his past, a chapter that, for the most part, he had learned to close. The more Alex thought about it, the more he felt that his life was slipping through his fingers like sand. It wasn't that he disliked his job, or that he didn't appreciate the life he'd built. It was just that he had begun to wonder whether there was something bigger out there, something he hadn't yet tapped into. Something that might explain the gnawing emptiness he felt. Little did he know, he was about to be thrown headfirst into a mystery that would turn everything upside down, something that would challenge not only his perceptions of himself but also his understanding of the people around him. The bag in his hands now felt heavier than it should, as if it were pressing down on him in more ways than one. He glanced around again, but the street remained eerily quiet. No one had come running to claim it. The letter, those strange words printed on the page, felt too coincidental to ignore. His mind raced as he tried to piece together the connection. Who had left this letter for him, and why? What was the significance of the words in that letter, words that hinted at things he hadn't even begun to process? He couldn't shake the feeling that this was no random occurrence, no mere act of forgetfulness. He felt like he had been lured into this moment, as if the universe had decided to pull him in, to place him at the crossroads of a mystery that was far bigger than him. And yet, as much as he wanted to ignore it, there was a part of him, a part he couldn't deny, that was intrigued. He had to know more. Alex's fingers gripped the letter tighter as he recalled a conversation he'd had with a colleague, Jenna, just a few days earlier. She'd been talking about her own strange encounter, a series of coincidences that felt like they were part of a larger plan. At first, Alex had brushed it off as Jenna being overdramatic, but now, standing here with the weight of the letter in his hands, he couldn't help but wonder if her story had been a warning, something she'd been trying to tell him without realizing it. Was she somehow connected to this strange situation, or was it merely another piece of the puzzle falling into place? Still, there was a nagging feeling, a sense that this was just the surface of something much deeper. Could the woman who left the bag be someone he knew? Someone from his past? His mind flickered to faces he hadn't thought of in years. What if it was someone like Amber, an old acquaintance from a few years ago? They'd crossed paths at a mutual friend's party, but they had only spoken for a few minutes, barely enough to exchange pleasantries. There was no reason to think she would be involved in something like this, yet the idea nagged at him. Maybe it wasn't Amber. But then again, maybe it was. The mystery only deepened as he considered the possibility of knowing someone who could be involved in something he had no idea about. But Amber wasn't the only one from his past who had left an impression on him. There was also Marcus, someone he'd worked with briefly on a freelance project. Marcus had always seemed a little too eager to offer advice, a little too curious about Alex's life. He'd dropped out of college early, and there had always been something unsettling about the way he would sometimes show up unannounced at places Alex frequented. Alex had never thought much of it until now, but in retrospect, there were times when Marcus had asked strange, probing questions that Alex had chalked up to simple curiosity. Now, in the wake of this mysterious letter, Alex wondered if Marcus's curiosity had gone beyond mere interest. Was he connected to whatever was going on with the bag? Could Marcus be watching him, pulling strings behind the scenes without him even realizing it? And then there was the possibility of someone entirely unexpected, a person who had never been in Alex's life before, but who had somehow found a way to weave themselves into his story. Was the letter, and the bag it had come with, a sign of something larger, something that Alex had never prepared for? The more Alex pondered these possibilities, the more it felt as though the pieces of his life were being drawn together by some unseen hand. It was as though every choice, every interaction, and every person he had encountered up to this point had led him here, to this one pivotal moment where everything could change. But he wasn't sure he was ready to face whatever was waiting for him. The tension was building layer after layer, each moment stretching longer, the silence more oppressive. Something was coming, and Alex could feel it. He could feel it in his gut. And it was only a matter of time before the answers would come crashing down around him, whether he was prepared or not. Was the letter meant for him? Or was he just another pawn in a much larger game? And who was behind it all? The mystery seemed to be growing, pulling him deeper into its web, and he couldn't escape. Not now. Not when he was so close to uncovering the truth. But the deeper Alex went, the more he realized that what was happening wasn't just about him anymore. It was about someone else. Someone whose secrets were now entwined with his own, and whose hidden truth was about to change everything. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Every time he turned a corner, every time he opened a door, it seemed like someone was just out of sight, waiting. He tried to convince himself that it was paranoia, that he was simply overthinking everything because of the strange, unsettling nature of the situation he was in. But deep down, he knew something wasn't right. There was a pattern to all of this, one that was becoming harder to ignore with each passing moment. The letter, the forgotten bag, it all felt too deliberate, too connected to his life in ways that went beyond coincidence. The truth was out there, he could feel it, but every step he took toward uncovering it only seemed to lead him deeper into a maze of dead ends, distractions, and unexpected obstacles. The first real setback came when Alex tried to reach out to the woman he thought might be the owner of the bag, a name he found scribbled in the corner of the letter. The name was Emily. He figured it was worth a shot, so he searched for her on social media, sending her a message through every possible channel: Facebook, Instagram, even LinkedIn. He had to know if this mysterious person was connected to the letter, and if she was, what that connection meant for him. But he never got a response. Days passed, and each time he checked his phone, the screen was silent. No reply. It wasn't that he expected an immediate response, but the silence felt like an eerie message in itself. Was this a sign that he was digging in the wrong direction? Or was it something more? Then came the strange phone call. It was a random number, one Alex didn't recognize, but he answered it anyway, his curiosity getting the better of him. The voice on the other end was calm, almost soothing, but the words made Alex's stomach tighten. "You don't know what you're getting into, Alex. You need to stop looking for answers. It's better if you just let it go." The voice was familiar, too familiar, but it was muffled, as if the person was speaking through some sort of filter. Before Alex could ask who it was, the line went dead, leaving him holding his phone in his hand, the weight of the conversation sinking in. It wasn't just a warning, it felt like a threat, a promise that someone was watching, someone who didn't want him to uncover the truth. Who could it be? Was it the mysterious woman who had left the letter? Or was someone else involved, someone closer to him than he realized? The timing couldn't have been worse. The next day, Alex had planned to visit the address written on the envelope he had found with the letter, an old apartment building on the outskirts of the city. He wasn't sure what he'd find there, but something told him that whatever secrets were hidden in that place were tied to the strange feeling that had been gnawing at him. When he arrived, however, his stomach sank as he saw that the apartment was vacant. The door was locked, and the building manager, a gruff older man with a suspicious glare, informed Alex that the tenant had moved out months ago. That wasn't the first thing that raised a red flag, though. The real shock came when Alex asked about the woman, Emily. The man's demeanor shifted immediately, and his response was cold, almost dismissive. "I don't know who you're talking about. You better leave it alone. People like that don't just disappear without reason." His words were clipped, sharp, like he was trying to send a message, like he knew something Alex didn't. But just as quickly as the conversation had shifted, the man's expression softened, and he turned away, muttering something about not getting involved. As Alex walked away, the unease in his gut grew heavier. He felt like he was one step away from uncovering a truth that no one wanted him to know. But every lead he followed seemed to disintegrate before his eyes, as though someone or something was actively trying to keep him from finding the answers. The more he tried to piece together the puzzle, the more pieces seemed to vanish. It was like the truth was being deliberately hidden from him, pulled away just when he thought he was close. The next day, things took another strange turn. Alex received a package at his apartment, a small, unmarked box with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, an old black and white image of a woman he didn't recognize, standing in front of a rundown building that looked strangely familiar. The moment Alex saw it, his heart skipped a beat. He had seen that building before, it was the same one he had visited earlier. But this wasn't just a random photo. There was something hauntingly personal about it. The woman's face was partially obscured, but her eyes, those eyes, looked directly at the camera, almost as if they were staring straight at Alex. A chill ran down his spine as he turned the photo over. On the back was a single sentence, written in the same handwriting as the letter he had found with the bag: "You're getting too close. Stop now, or you'll regret it." It was the same threat, only this time it felt more direct. Whoever was behind this was starting to feel desperate, and that made Alex more determined than ever to uncover the truth. But the more he dug, the more complicated things became. He began to wonder if the warning wasn't just about him at all. Maybe there was someone else involved, someone with a hidden agenda, someone who had been pulling strings from the shadows all along. Was the person who sent the photo trying to stop him from discovering something, or were they simply trying to cover their tracks? Alex had no way of knowing for sure, but he knew one thing: he couldn't back down now. It was then that he ran into Jenna again, the same colleague who had mentioned the strange coincidences in her life. She seemed to be everywhere lately, popping up at the most unexpected times. At first, Alex thought nothing of it, just a friend trying to offer some support. But when she started asking more questions than usual about the letter, the bag, and his investigation, Alex's suspicion grew. There was something off about her, something that felt like she knew more than she was letting on. Could she be involved in all of this? Or was she just an innocent bystander, trying to make sense of something as confused as he was? Then, in the middle of their conversation, something happened that made Alex freeze in his tracks. Jenna's phone buzzed, and her expression changed instantly. It wasn't just that she looked distracted, it was the way her eyes darted to the screen, then back to Alex. The shift was subtle, but unmistakable. She quickly stuffed the phone back into her pocket, forcing a smile. But Alex couldn't shake the feeling that he had just glimpsed something he wasn't meant to see. Was she hiding something? Or was it all a coincidence? And with that, a new layer of uncertainty wrapped itself around Alex's investigation. The truth was slipping further away with every passing minute, and now, the people closest to him seemed to be part of the web, complicating everything he thought he knew. As he looked around, the walls seemed to close in. He was no longer just searching for answers. He was now part of a game whose rules kept shifting, whose players were shrouded in mystery, and whose stakes were higher than he could have ever anticipated. But the biggest question of all remained unanswered. What was the secret hidden behind the letter, the bag, and the warnings that kept following him? And why did it feel like someone was ready to do anything to make sure he never found out? Just as Alex thought he was beginning to piece together the puzzle, things took an unexpected turn, spiraling the mystery even deeper into uncertainty. It started when his phone buzzed late one evening, an odd hour for anyone to reach out. The message, when he checked it, seemed completely unrelated at first. It was from his mother, someone he hadn't spoken to in weeks. He wasn't exactly estranged from her, but their relationship had always been a bit distant. She had her life, and Alex had his, and they rarely found much to talk about beyond the occasional check-in. The street was dark, empty, as if no one was around. But as his gaze moved across the street, something caught his attention, someone standing at the far corner of the block, partially hidden in the shadows. The figure was too far away to see clearly, but something about the way they stood, still, unmoving, watching, sent a cold shiver down Alex's spine. His breath hitched as the figure slowly turned and disappeared into the night, as if vanishing into the darkness itself. Was it just his imagination? Or had someone been waiting for him to notice them? He couldn't tell, but the feeling that he was being watched, a feeling that had been building for days, was now undeniable. Every corner of his apartment felt suffocating, the walls closing in, and his mind began to spiral. Had he always been followed, even when he hadn't realized it? Was this all part of something bigger, something darker, something that went deeper than he could comprehend? The weight of it all crushed him. He felt exposed, vulnerable. Every creak in the floorboards, every distant sound outside, felt amplified. He was no longer in control, and that terrified him more than anything. Without thinking, Alex grabbed his keys and rushed out of the apartment. He needed to get out, to clear his head, to regain some sense of stability. But as he stepped into the hallway, something made him pause. His heart skipped a beat as he noticed the faint sound of footsteps that weren't his own. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end as he turned, slowly, to see a shadow moving down the hall. Someone was coming, someone who knew exactly where he was. Alex's stomach dropped, the sense of danger intensifying with every second. His breath came faster, his pulse racing in his ears. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and just as Alex's instincts told him to run, the figure emerged from the shadows, a man in a dark coat, his face obscured by the hood of his sweatshirt. The man's eyes locked onto Alex's, and for a split second, time seemed to freeze. The stranger didn't speak, didn't make a move, he just stood there, watching, like he had been waiting for Alex to come to him. The silence was suffocating, heavy, filled with an unspoken threat. Then, without a word, the man turned and walked away, disappearing into the stairwell. Alex stood frozen, his mind racing. Who was this man? Why was he here? What did he want from him? The questions were endless, swirling in his mind like a storm. But what terrified Alex more than anything was the feeling that this was no longer about a mystery, this was about survival. Someone, or something, had been pulling the strings, and Alex was now tangled in the web. Whoever this man was, whatever this threat was, it was real, and it was closing in on him faster than he could react. He didn't have time to think. He didn't have time to process. His only thought was to get out, to escape before it was too late. But as he reached for the elevator, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from Jenna. "Alex, where are you? I don't know how, but they're watching me. They've been here. They know everything. Please don't trust anyone. I'm scared." Alex's blood ran cold as the weight of her words sank in. They know everything. Whatever this was, whatever game he was caught in, he wasn't alone. Jenna was in danger too, And whoever was behind this wasn't just playing with their lives, they were playing with their minds, their safety, their very existence. The line between friend and enemy had blurred, and the fear of not knowing who to trust, who to believe, was starting to eat away at him. As Alex stood there, a voice echoed in his head, "It's already too late." The warning from the notebook. From the moment he'd opened that package, the moment the first letter arrived, he had been a target. He couldn't escape this. He couldn't hide from it. Whoever had orchestrated this twisted game was about to show him just how far they were willing to go. And the worst part was, he didn't know if he'd ever make it out alive. Just when Alex thought the pressure was too much to handle, when the paranoia, fear, and confusion seemed like they were going to consume him, something happened that twisted everything he had believed. He had just returned to his apartment, heart still racing from the confrontation in the hallway. His mind was tangled in a web of suspicion, unable to trust anyone, not even Jenna, despite everything they'd been through together. The walls of his apartment, which had once felt like a safe haven, now seemed like a trap. His phone buzzed again, and this time, the name on the screen made his stomach churn. It was his mother. Alex hesitated before picking up the call, his mind still spinning with all the chaos that had unfolded over the past few days. When he finally pressed the phone to his ear, he could hear the frantic edge in her voice. "Alex," she whispered urgently, "you need to listen to me. It's not what you think. You're in danger, but it's not the people you think. You've been lied to, all of you." Her voice trembled with fear, and for a moment, Alex felt a flicker of relief. Maybe his mother was just scared, maybe she had answers, maybe there was something she could tell him to make sense of all the madness. But what she said next shattered everything. "Do you remember the day I asked you to come over to my house, the day you found that envelope?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "That wasn't the first time. The same man, he came to my house years ago, long before you ever found that bag. He came for me, Alex, and I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to get involved, but now it's too late." Alex's blood ran cold. Years ago. What was she talking about? The mystery had started with the bag, with the strange letter, and the warning, but now his mother was telling him that the roots of this twisted game stretched much further back, deeper than he ever realized. His mind raced as he processed her words. The man, the figure that had been haunting his every move, the person watching him, leaving cryptic messages, had been involved with his family long before he'd ever crossed paths with them. But why? Why had his mother kept this secret from him? And who was this man? Before he could ask another question, his mother's voice grew quieter, tinged with something like regret. "Alex, I didn't want to tell you the truth because I thought it was over. But I see now that it wasn't. That letter you found, it's connected to something much bigger than you could ever imagine. Something that's been following our family for years." She paused, and in that silence, Alex's heart hammered in his chest. "It's not just about you. It's about everyone who's ever been close to us. And there's one thing you need to know, the man who's been sending those letters, the one who's been pulling all the strings, he's not a stranger. He's someone you already know." Alex's head spun. Someone he already knew? The world around him seemed to tilt on its axis. How could that be possible? He was sure he'd never seen this man before, never crossed paths with him. He had no idea who could be behind this. But as his mother's words sank in, a horrible realization crept in, a cold certainty that gnawed at him, something that threatened to unearth everything he had believed. "Mom, who is it?" he demanded, voice shaking, unable to keep the panic from rising in his throat. "Who is this man? What do you mean, someone I know?" There was a long pause, one that stretched on for far too long. Alex could hear his mother's breath on the other end of the line, a soft sound, like she was trying to find the courage to say the words that had been haunting her. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely audible. "Alex, it's Jenna." The words hit him like a slap across the face. His stomach twisted, bile rising in his throat as he gripped the phone tighter, unable to comprehend what he was hearing. Jenna. The woman who had been by his side through this whole nightmare, the person who had seemed so terrified, so vulnerable, she was behind it all? His mind raced, flashing back to every conversation, every moment they'd shared since this had all begun. Jenna had always been the one to urge him to keep going, to push deeper, to try to uncover the truth. She had always been by his side, comforting him when he was at his lowest, urging him to trust her. But now, suddenly, everything seemed tainted. What if she had been playing him this entire time? What if she was working with the person who had been pulling the strings all along? The person who had been threatening not just him, but his mother, his entire life. It felt like the ground beneath him was crumbling, and the walls he had built around himself for protection were shattering one by one. "Mom, no, this doesn't make sense," Alex stammered, trying to process the impossible. Jenna, she was scared, too. She didn't know what was happening. She was just as confused as I was. His voice cracked with disbelief, each word harder to say than the last. But his mother wasn't backing down. "Alex," she said, her voice firm now, "you have to understand. Jenna's not the person you think she is. She's been working with him from the start, and she's been manipulating you, using you to get closer to something that's bigger than you could imagine." Her words were cutting, slicing through the fragile trust Alex had placed in her. "She's been trained, Alex. She's part of this whole thing, and I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from it. But you have to get out now. Leave everything behind. This has never been about a letter, or a bag, it's about you. About what you know." Alex's world tilted again, this time with a force that nearly knocked him to his knees. He could feel the air in the room thicken, suffocating him as he tried to make sense of what was happening. How could he have been so wrong about Jenna? How could he have trusted her, confided in her, believed in her when she had been part of this all along? It didn't add up, and yet, every word his mother said now rang with a terrible truth he couldn't ignore. But just as he was about to say something, anything to make sense of this new nightmare, the call suddenly dropped. No warning, no explanation. The line went dead, leaving only the hollow sound of silence in its wake. Alex stared at the phone in his hand, his mind reeling. Was it possible that his mother was lying? That she was trying to cover her own tracks? Or was she telling the truth, and the woman he thought he could trust was the one person who had been orchestrating everything from the very beginning? The questions piled up like an insurmountable mountain, and the fear swelled inside him, threatening to overwhelm him. Who could he trust now? The lines between friend and enemy had blurred, and every person he had known, every connection he had made, now seemed like part of a carefully constructed illusion. There was no turning back, no way to undo the damage. He was caught in a trap, and the only thing he knew for sure was that nothing was what it seemed. The days blurred together in a haze of sleepless nights, overwhelming paranoia, and a sense of impending doom that never seemed to lift. Alex couldn't escape the truth that was closing in on him from all sides. Jenna, the woman he had trusted more than anyone, had been part of the twisted game all along. But what he didn't understand, what gnawed at his every waking moment, was why. Why had she done it? What had she been after? It felt like the answers were just out of reach, slipping through his fingers like smoke. Each new revelation only seemed to deepen the web of lies that he was caught in, and every person he had once turned to for support now felt like a stranger. His world had been turned upside down, and the ground beneath him was cracking open, ready to swallow him whole. It was late one evening, after another fruitless day of searching for answers, when his phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message from his mother, or a cryptic note from the mysterious man who seemed to be orchestrating his every move. It was a call from Jenna. He hadn't heard from her in days, not since the horrifying conversation with his mother. A part of him wanted to ignore it, wanted to push her away, but another part of him, one that still remembered the connection they'd shared, the late-night conversations, the way her presence had always made him feel safe, compelled him to answer. He pressed the phone to his ear, his breath tight, his heart racing. "Jenna," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper, as though saying her name out loud would make everything real. "What do you want?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she spoke, her voice shaky, vulnerable in a way that caught him off guard. "Alex, I didn't want it to go this far. I never wanted you to get involved. But there's no turning back now, and you need to understand everything I've done, everything I've said, it's all been for you. For us." Alex's head spun with confusion. For us? After everything that had happened, everything that he had learned, all the lies she had told, now she was saying it was for him? The weight of her words felt like a cruel joke. For us? Are you serious right now, Jenna? I don't even know who you are anymore. You've been part of this from the beginning. You lied to me. You betrayed me. And now you're telling me it was for us." Her voice cracked, and he could hear the desperation in it. "I'm sorry, Alex. I never meant to hurt you. But you need to know the truth. The things I've done, everything I've been a part of, the lies, the manipulation, none of it is what it seems. I never wanted you to get involved. But I needed you to understand something, to see something I couldn't explain. It's too dangerous for me to tell you everything over the phone. You have to come to me. Meet me. I'll explain everything." His heart raced, 1,000 thoughts crashing together in his mind. Was this another trap? Was she just playing him again, luring him into some deeper level of the game? Or was there really something she hadn't told him, something that would make sense of all the madness? He didn't know who to trust anymore. The woman he thought he knew, the woman who had stood by his side through everything, had been hiding something. Something so dark and dangerous that it had already cost him his peace of mind, his safety, and soon, perhaps his life. He felt the weight of the decision bearing down on him, and yet, no matter how much he wanted to walk away, part of him still yearned for answers. For closure. For some kind of truth that would make it all stop. But as he wrestled with the choice, another text came through. This one was from his mother. It was brief, cryptic, and cold. "Don't trust her. She's part of this. Get out while you still can." Alex stared at the message, his mind reeling. His mother had warned him. She had always warned him about Jenna, but now it felt like a cruel twist of fate. Was she telling him the truth, or was she trying to protect herself? Was she trying to manipulate him, just like Jenna had? He didn't know what to believe anymore, but one thing was clear: no matter what choice he made, it would come with consequences. Consequences that might destroy the fragile grip he still had on his life. His thoughts swirled in a storm of uncertainty. He couldn't just sit here forever, letting the mystery suffocate him. If he went to Jenna, he could finally confront her, demand the truth, force her to tell him everything. But what if it was a trap? What if she was leading him right into the heart of the danger he had been trying to avoid? What if trusting her again was the final mistake that cost him everything? But if he walked away now, if he chose to listen to his mother and cut all ties with Jenna, what would that do to him? Would he ever be able to live with the regret, the unanswered questions, the nagging feeling that there was something important he'd missed? The tension was unbearable, the pressure on his chest so thick he could barely breathe. He couldn't turn back. He couldn't stay frozen in this moment, caught between two impossible choices. He had to choose. And just when it seemed like the weight of the decision would crush him, his phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. Alex hesitated, fear bubbling up in his throat as he picked up the call. "Hello." His voice was raw, desperate for any answer. "Alex," a familiar voice said on the other end of the line. It was Jenna. But there was something different in her tone, something colder, more urgent. "You don't have much time. They know where you are. I don't know how, but they've found you. You need to make a choice. Right now. Come to me, or run. But if you stay where you are, you're going to regret it. I can't help you anymore. I've done everything I can, and now you have to decide what happens next." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. He could feel his mind unraveling, his thoughts scattering in all directions. Whatever had been happening to him, whatever game he had been a pawn in, was now escalating faster than he could keep up. And with every decision he made, every choice he was forced to confront, the stakes only grew higher. Whoever was behind this, whatever forces were at work, they were closing in on him. His world had been turned upside down, and now, he was at a crossroads. The truth, his safety, the people he loved, the danger lurking in every shadow, all of it rested on the next move he made. But there was one thing Alex knew for sure: whatever choice he made, he couldn't go back. And that realization, the knowledge that there was no way out, was what made his heart stop in his chest. The game was over, and now it was time to face the consequences. The air around Alex seemed to grow colder with every passing minute. His mind was a whirlwind of doubt, fear, and confusion, but the clock was ticking, and the reality of the situation had never been clearer. He wasn't just being watched anymore. He wasn't just a victim of some twisted game between him and Jenna. This was much bigger, much darker, and now the stakes were higher than ever. The phone call from Jenna had left him shaken, but it wasn't just her cryptic warning that made his skin crawl, it was the realization that everything had spiraled beyond his control. He thought he could trust her, but the more he thought about it, the more he felt the weight of her words from earlier. "I've done everything I can, and now you have to decide what happens next." What had she meant by that? She had always been there, right? Always at his side when things got rough, offering guidance, comfort, and reassurance. But now, every piece of their past seemed to fall into question, as if nothing about her had been real. It wasn't just Jenna anymore. Alex felt the room spin as he pieced together the fragments of his shattered understanding. His mother's warnings, the cryptic letters, the hidden connections, it all began to make sense in a terrifying way. There were people involved that he never imagined, and this wasn't just a simple case of one twisted individual playing a game. He was part of something far more complex and dangerous, something that reached deep into his family's history, into his very life. What had begun as a single mysterious bag had exploded into a web of lies, manipulation, and betrayal that involved more people than he could have ever guessed. The layers were thick, and every time he thought he'd uncovered a truth, another lie would emerge, just as deep and tangled. He was standing on the edge now, the abyss yawning before him. A decision had to be made. The tension in the air was suffocating, and he could feel the walls of the room closing in on him. It was all too much, too fast. He needed answers. He needed them now, before he lost everything. He grabbed his jacket, rushed out of his apartment, and drove as fast as he could to meet Jenna. His hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white, as his mind raced, calculating every possible outcome. Was this a trap? Was he walking right into the heart of the conspiracy, or was Jenna's warning the last thread of truth he could cling to? He had no idea, but he knew he didn't have the luxury of time. He couldn't sit and wait to be swept away by whatever dark forces were closing in on him. When he reached the old warehouse on the outskirts of town, the place where Jenna had told him to meet her, the place that had once felt like a safe rendezvous, it now seemed like the last place on earth he should be. The lights were dim, flickering in the distance, casting long shadows on the cracked pavement. The silence was oppressive, and Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching him. He stepped out of his car, his heart pounding in his chest, every instinct screaming at him to turn back. But he couldn't, he was too deep in it now. He had no choice but to face whatever waited for him inside. The door creaked as he pushed it open, and the musty smell of the abandoned building hit him like a punch to the gut. He felt a chill run down his spine as he stepped inside, his eyes slowly adjusting to the darkness. The silence was thick, like the calm before a storm. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw a figure move, quick, silent, almost as if it were a shadow. "Jenna!" Alex called out, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. No response. He took a cautious step forward, the creaking floorboards echoing in the stillness. His nerves were on edge, every muscle in his body tense, every sense heightened as if the very air were charged with danger. He kept moving, each step heavier than the last, until he reached the center of the warehouse. And there, standing in front of him, was Jenna. But she wasn't alone. There were two other people with her, two men, faces shadowed in the dim light, their presence sending a wave of ice through his veins. One of them, the taller one, stepped forward, his face now illuminated by the flickering light. Alex froze as he recognized him, Kyle. Kyle, the man who had been his closest friend for years, the man who had always had his back, who had been with him through thick and thin. He couldn't believe it. How could Kyle be here, standing with Jenna, involved in this? "Alex," Jenna said, her voice trembling, but this time, it wasn't the reassuring tone he was used to. There was something colder in it now, something distant, almost detached. "I'm sorry. I didn't want it to be like this, but there's no other way. You need to understand, you're part of something much bigger than you thought. And it's too late to back out." Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he stared between them, struggling to comprehend the enormity of what was unfolding. Bigger than he thought? He had been right all along. This wasn't just about a letter, a bag, or even Jenna. This was about something far more dangerous, something that had been brewing for years. It was about people who had been orchestrating everything, pulling strings from the shadows. He had been their pawn, and now they were ready to sacrifice him. The taller man, Kyle, took a step forward, his eyes cold, calculating. You were never meant to know this much, Alex. You should have stayed out of it. His voice was sharp, cruel even, and for the first time, Alex saw something in Kyle's eyes that made his stomach drop, contempt. It was as though everything they'd shared, every friendship, every bond, had been a lie. Alex's mind raced as he processed the shock of Kyle's betrayal. What was happening? How had he been so blind? How could he have trusted the very people who were now standing against him? The reality of the situation hit him like a punch to the gut, and he felt the walls close in tighter than ever before. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He wasn't just trying to uncover the truth. He was part of something far more dangerous, a conspiracy that involved more than just a few bad actors. There were people in power, people who were willing to do anything to protect their secrets, even if it meant destroying him. His thoughts were interrupted when Kyle's voice cut through the silence. You've been asking the wrong questions, Alex. You should have never gotten involved. And now you're going to wish you hadn't. Before Alex could react, Jenna stepped in, her eyes filled with regret. Kyle, no. He doesn't know everything. We don't have to do this. There's another way. Kyle raised a hand, silencing her. It's too late. There's no way back now. Alex's mind raced, adrenaline flooding his veins. He knew one thing for sure, the people he thought he could trust were the very ones who had betrayed him. He had no allies, no safety net. And worse, the conspiracy was so much bigger than he had ever imagined, so much more dangerous. The stakes had just gone up, and Alex knew that whatever came next, it would be a fight for his life. And no matter what choice he made, he wasn't sure he would ever escape it. The room felt suffocating, as though the very walls were closing in on Alex. His heart pounded, a relentless drumbeat of fear and adrenaline. He stood frozen, caught between the betrayal of the people he thought he could trust and the undeniable realization that he was now standing at the very heart of something so much darker than he had ever imagined. Jenna and Kyle, once allies in his life, now stood as strangers, dangerous strangers. His mind raced, scrambling for a way out, for something, anything, that could explain what was happening, but nothing made sense. The puzzle pieces were scattered, the picture changing with every moment. The quiet between them was thick with tension, broken only by the faint hum of the warehouse's flickering lights. Kyle stepped closer, his expression one of cold indifference, as if the entire world had already been mapped out and Alex was just another small detail that didn't matter. You should have stayed out of it, Alex. Kyle's voice was laced with finality, each word carefully measured, as if he were delivering a sentence. You think you know the truth? You think you've uncovered something? You've barely scratched the surface. You've been part of this from the beginning, but now it's time to finish it. Alex felt a surge of panic, his throat tightening as the weight of Kyle's words hit him like a punch to the gut. The feeling of being powerless, of being trapped in this nightmare that had spiraled out of control, was almost more than he could bear. He had to do something. He had to take back control. But how? Jenna, standing a few feet away, looked at him with a mixture of sorrow and guilt in her eyes. It was clear she was conflicted, torn between loyalty and something darker, something she wasn't willing to explain. I didn't want you to be part of this, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the tension in the air. But you are, and there's no way out now. We never wanted you to find out, this way. Alex swallowed hard, his pulse quickening as he pieced the puzzle together. Jenna's words, Kyle's cold demeanor, there was something bigger going on, something far beyond the simple game they'd played. They were both involved, yes, but so were others. The messages, the cryptic notes, the lies, it wasn't just about them. It was about something far more insidious, something that stretched across decades, buried in the very fabric of his family's history. And whatever it was, it had now reached its boiling point. But what were they really after? What did they want from him? Tell me the truth, Alex demanded, his voice shaking with frustration, his fists clenching at his sides. What do you want from me? Why is this happening? What is all of this really about? There was a long silence. Jenna's eyes flitted to Kyle, who stood still, his face unreadable. Finally, Kyle spoke, his voice carrying the weight of finality. You think you're some innocent bystander in all of this. You think you've been dragged into something you didn't deserve. The truth is, Alex, you're not just a victim, you've been part of this all along. Your father, your mother, they were involved in something bigger than you ever imagined. You're not just a pawn, you're the key. Alex's breath caught in his throat. His mind reeled. The key. Everything he thought he knew about his family, about his life, was crumbling around him. He had to know more. He had to understand. Before he could ask another question, Jenna stepped forward, her expression shifting from sorrow to something much darker. Your father wasn't just a businessman. He wasn't just someone trying to make a living. He was involved in things you don't even know about. Your mother, she knew. She always knew, and she protected you from it. But now, the truth can't stay buried anymore. The people who are behind this, they've been waiting for you to uncover the truth. And now that you have, they won't stop until it's all in their hands. The weight of her words crushed him, his knees almost giving out beneath him. He could feel the floor shift under his feet, as though the ground itself was betraying him. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Everything he thought he knew about his life, his family, nothing was what it seemed. He had been nothing more than a pawn in a game far beyond his understanding. And now, the people he trusted, the people he loved, were just as tangled in the conspiracy as the ones who had been pulling the strings all along. I never wanted it to be like this, Jenna said, her voice trembling, her eyes filled with regret. But it's too late. They've already marked you. If you walk away now, you'll never be free. But if you stay, if you play along, you'll be part of something far bigger than either of us. It's your choice, Alex. But you don't have much time. Make it. Alex stood there, his mind racing, trying to grasp the magnitude of what she was saying. The conspiracy was bigger than he could ever have imagined. He wasn't just a victim, he was part of it. His father, his mother, everything he'd ever known was a lie. And the danger wasn't just a game anymore, it was real. The people involved, the ones pulling the strings, they were after something. Something that involved him, something that could change everything. Just as he opened his mouth to speak, to demand the truth, the door to the warehouse suddenly crashed open. Bright lights flooded the room, blinding him for a moment as shadowy figures poured in. Armed men, faces hidden behind masks, all moving with chilling precision. The sudden chaos threw everything into disarray, and Alex's heart skipped a beat. Run, Kyle hissed, but there was no time to process the warning. Jenna's face turned pale as the armed men surrounded them, their weapons trained on him and his former allies. Alex didn't hesitate. In that split second, his instincts took over. He bolted, sprinting toward the door, adrenaline surging through him as he heard the sounds of shouting, of footsteps behind him, of the chase beginning. The cold night air hit him like a slap as he barreled out of the warehouse, his lungs burning as he ran, the sounds of pursuit growing louder. His mind was a whirlwind, but one thing was clear now, the truth he had uncovered was only the tip of the iceberg. The forces that had been controlling his life were far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. But there was no going back. He couldn't let them win. He couldn't let them take control of his life any longer. Just as he rounded the corner, desperate to escape, a figure stepped out from the shadows. It was Jenna, but she wasn't alone. A man stood beside her, a familiar face, but one Alex hadn't seen in years. His father. His father was alive. The realization hit Alex like a freight train. Everything, all the lies, all the manipulation, had been orchestrated by the one person he thought was gone forever. The truth, his father had never been dead. He had been part of it all along. The conspiracies, the lies, it had all been planned. And now, Alex had to choose. Run and hide or face the reality that everything he thought he knew was a lie. The final twist was just beginning. The endgame had arrived, and the battle for the truth had never been so dangerous. The dust had settled, but the weight of everything Alex had uncovered still pressed heavily on his chest. Standing there, face to face with his father alive, hidden for years, and now standing in the shadow of a life that had been carefully built on secrets and lies, Alex could hardly comprehend what was happening. His mind was a jumble of disbelief, rage, and confusion, yet amid it all, one undeniable truth had settled in. His father was the key to everything. The lies, the conspiracy, the danger, it all came from him, from a past Alex never knew existed. The man he had mourned, the man he had thought was gone forever, had orchestrated it all, shaping Alex's life into a maze of manipulation. His father looked at him with a mixture of guilt and something colder, something Alex couldn't quite place. "You've come so far, son," his father said, his voice soft, almost too calm. "You were always meant to find out. I didn't want this for you. But you were never really safe. They were always watching, always waiting for you to stumble into the truth. And now that you have, I don't know what's left for us." Alex didn't know what to say. Everything he had believed in, every memory he had of his father, was shattering before his eyes. How could the man he loved, who had raised him, who had been his rock, be capable of such deceit? And how could Alex have been so blind? He had always trusted, always believed that the answers would be simple, that the truth would set him free. But there was no freedom in this, only more questions, more twists, and a sense that even in the end, there were pieces of this story that would never fall into place. Jenna stood beside his father, her eyes still full of regret, but there was something else there now, a hint of resolve. "We didn't want this for you, Alex," she said quietly. "But we're in too deep now. We've tried to protect you. And maybe, in the end, we can still keep you safe. But you have to decide if you want to be part of this, or if you want to walk away. It's your choice. It's always been your choice." Alex looked at her, then at his father, his mind racing with the weight of everything they were saying. Safe? Protect him? After everything, how could they even pretend to offer him safety? How could he ever trust any of them again, knowing that they were the ones who had dragged him into this mess in the first place? But there was something in Jenna's eyes, something desperate, something that told him this wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. The people who had been pulling the strings, the ones who had manipulated his family for so long, weren't done with him. They hadn't forgotten about him, not yet. There was no escaping this, no walking away. The only choice now was how to fight back. As the reality of the situation sank in, a strange calmness washed over Alex. He understood now that the answers he had sought, the truth that had driven him to this point, were only part of the puzzle. The bigger picture was still out there, and the people responsible for everything, the ones who had used his family, used him, weren't just going to let this go. But what Alex also realized in that moment was that he was no longer the same person who had started this journey. He had changed. He had seen the darkness, understood the power of manipulation and control, and now, he was ready to fight back. No more hiding, no more running. The stakes were too high, and the game was far from over. "I can't undo the past," Alex said, his voice steady now, his mind focused. "But I can make sure that whatever happens next, I'm not going to be anyone's pawn anymore. Not mine, not anyone else's." He looked directly at his father, at Jenna, and then turned toward the door, knowing full well that stepping outside would be the first step toward the unknown. But it was the only step he could take now. His father's eyes softened, a fleeting moment of regret flashing across his face. "You don't understand, Alex. It's not that simple. There are things I have done that can't be undone. If you think this is over, you're wrong." But Alex didn't look back. He knew that, for the first time, he was taking control of his own destiny. The truth was messy, it was painful, and it was dangerous. But it was his truth now, and no one could take that from him. As he walked out into the night, the cool air biting at his skin, he knew that the road ahead would be far from easy. There were still mysteries to uncover, battles to fight, and enemies to confront. But as long as he stood firm, as long as he kept searching for the truth, he could face whatever came next. But just as Alex reached his car, ready to leave the past behind, a final message blinked onto his phone, a simple text from an unknown number. "You think you've escaped? This isn't over. Not by a long shot." Alex stared at the message, his breath catching in his throat. The game was far from over, and whatever he had just begun, the real battle was just starting. As the screen of his phone went dark, he realized one last truth: there was no such thing as true peace. There were only choices, and the consequences of those choices. What had started as a mystery was now a war, and the only thing left to do was fight. The final twist wasn't about uncovering the truth. It was about understanding that sometimes, the The truth itself is just another part of the game. And as Alex drove off into the darkness, the weight of everything he had learned sat heavily in his chest. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning.